Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode on economic and economical aspects and School of Talent Economy. Our target is that in the COVID periods, every country has different kind of challenges and every country has different kind of motive, and we have to understand the economical situations as well as we have to take a proper strategy that we can solve the present situation. So I directly want to go to the objective of these chapters. The objective of this chapter is to complete the uh, Keynesian model by adding the government and the foreign sector. Why is government spending and autonomous expenditures? Government spending can be the result of political decision regardless of national output. Why is not export assumed to be negative? Spending for import usually exceed the value of export. Autonomous government spending. Here is the x-axis. X-axis is a real GDP, trillions of dollar per year. And this is y-axis. Y-axis is a real government spending, trillions of dollar per year. So in the x-axis, there is a G, G1 and G2. So G1 is the increase in government spending and G2 equals to decrease in government spending. So this is the particulars, the shape where actually we can understand how actually government spendings. Let's say if the government expending 1.5 trillion dollar more, this is the increase in government spending. On the other hand, if government decrease 0.5 trillion dollars, this is the decrease of spending, government spending. So if you see in these things, if government increase its impact, in y-axis, and if government decrease, then it has an impact in y-axis. So this is the autonomous net export. Autonomous net export equal to negative net export, positive net export, zero net exports. In the zero net export, it has a x minus m2, x minus m, and x minus m. So negative net export. This is the real GDP, trillions of dollar per year, and this is the real net export, trillions of dollar per year. In the Keynesian model, where is the equilibrium level of GDP? It is where the value of goods and services produced is equal to the spending for these goods and services. What does aggregate expenditure mean? Aggregate expenditures equals to C plus 1 plus G plus X minus M. So C equals to consumption, I equals to investment, G equals to government spending, and X and M equals to next export. How do aggregate expenditure affect the economy? Aggregate expenditure pull aggregate output either higher or lower towards equilibrium. What caused a decrease in real GDP and employment? Excessive inventories. If we have excessive inventories, that time our GDP and employments also decrease. Why do excessive inventories cause unemployment? Farms will cut back productions and lay off workers in order not to add into inventory excessively. So if we have enough products in our inventories, that time farms basically cut back production and lay off worker in order not to add to inventories excessively. What causes increase in GDP and employment? Inventory depletions or reductions. So example, what happen when inventories decline too much? Farm will increase productions and hire more workers to meet the demand for their production. What is the aggregate expenditure model? Aggregate expenditure model determines the equilibrium level of real GDP by the intersections of aggregate expenditures and aggregate output. So equilibriums and these equilibrium level of output and incomes. So aggregate output and income equals to ones, and consumptions, it's a C. Inventory investments, this is I. Government, G. Net export, X minus M. Aggregate expenditure, AE. Are planned inventory investment depreciations or accumulations, and directions of real GDP and employments. In that particular points, here we can find aggregate output and outputs and income. Real GDP will be 5, consumption 3.1, investment 1, government it will be 1, net export minus 0.1, aggregate expenditures 5, unplanned inventory investment depletions and accumulation will be 0. Direction of the real GDP and employment will be equilibrium. Exhibit 3, the aggregate expenditure model. So aggregate expenditure model, there is a x-axis. X-axis is the real GDP, y-axis real aggregate expenditures. So in this particular area, AE and AEY axis, it's actually equilibrium point is here, and 6 when it's trillions of real GDP is 5, that time real aggregate expenditure will be 5. This is the E, and the GDP gap is full employment in the 6 full employments. So that is the GDP gap, GDP gap in the aggregate expenditure model. How can full employment be reached in the previous graph? The aggregate expenditure curve must be shifted upward until the full capacity output of $6 trillion is reduced. What is the spending multiplier? Any increase in government spending will lead to a multiple increase in GDP. The spending multiplier is the ratio of change in GDP to the change in autonomous expenditures. Since the change in GDP is greater than in AE, the multiplier is greater than 1. How does the multiplier works? Any change in spending cause a chain reaction of more spending. The multiplier effect refers to the increase in final income arising from any new injections of spending. The size of the multiplier demands upon household marginal decisions to spend, called the marginal propensity to the consumption, or to save, the called the marginal propensity to the save. So here is the diagram. Initial increase in government spending, it push operate through a multipliers, and then it push large increase in real GDP. So if we focus on that particular points, we can find that it's in the x-axis, this is the real GDP, and the y-axis, this is the real consumption and governments. So in that particular points, A E equals to Y, spending multiplier effect to change a government's spending, it's a y-axis, and this is the E2, it's more than 5, and in that particular situation, this is the equilibrium points. In the equilibrium points, the full employment happen, and this is the ultimately the maximum place, and this is the plus 0.5 GDP. This is actually the changes. This is the things happen when spending multiplier effect of a change in government changing. So at present, when we discuss with the different kind of interesting topics, we have to understand that how actually GDP converted, how we have to create this GDP create more opportunity for employment creations, as well as more expenditures and things. If we can understand these things in a proper way, if we can understand these things in a professional way, that times we can take necessary things. What is the marginal propensity to the consumption consume? MPC is the change in consumption spending resulting from a given change in income. What is the marginal propensity to save? MPS. MPS is a fraction of any changes in real disposable income that household save. What is the relationship between MPC and MPS? MPC plus MPS equals to 1. What is the formula for spending multiplier? When we go for the spending multiplier, the formula will be 1 divided by 1 minus MPC, or 1 divided by MPS. If the MPS is zero point 0.5, what is the multiplier? Multiply 1 divided by MPS equals to 1 divided by 1 divided by 2 equals to it will the result will be 2. So here is the sum of the spending multiplier effect. If we can understand the spending multiplier effect, then we can move forward some of the interesting points. Let's say spending multiplier. There is a three components. Here is round, different kind of round component of the total spending, and new consumption spending, and all amount are rounded to be the nearest $1 billion per year. In the round one, government is spending $500 billion. Round two, its a consumption is $250 billion, and round three consumption is $125 billion. Round four consumption is $63 billion. So all other around consumption will be 62. So total spending on these things will be $1,000 billion. Relationship between MPC, MPS and the spending multiplier. MPC equals to marginal propensity to consumer, MPS marginal propensity to save, and the spending multiplier equal to SM. So in that points, 1 equals to 0.9 plus zero point 0.1 equals to 1, and the multiplier will be 10. Here is 0.8 plus 0.20 equals to 1, it will be 5. 3 equals to 0.75 plus 0.25 equals to 1, it will be 4. 4 equals to 0.67 plus 0.33 equals to 1, 3. 5 equals to 0.50 plus 0.50 equals to 1, it will be 2. And the 6 marginal MPC will be 0.33 plus marginal propensity to save, it will be 0.67, and result will be 1, and spending multiplier will be 1.5. So what is the relationship between MPC, marginal propensity to consume, and MPS, marginal propensity to save? MPC plus MPS equals to 1. What is the formula for spending multiplier? 1 divided by 1 minus MPC, or 1 divided by MPS. MPC equals to 1 divided by 1 minus 0.90 equals to 1 divided by 0.10, it will be 10, or MPS equal to 1 divided by 10, it will be 0.10. What is the GDP gap? So if we want to find out the GDP gap, this is very important in the present scenario, especially now every countries they fall their GDP, and in that situation they are taking many initiative. They are taking different kind of activities, they are taking different kind of initiative. uh, Initiative. What is the GDP gap? The difference between full employment real GDP and actual real GDP. GDP gap represent production and value that is irretrievably lost due to shortage of employment opportunity. So the difference between full employment real GDP and actual real GDP, this is very important for that. What is the recessionary gap? The amount by which aggregate expenditure falls short of the amount required to achieve full employment equilibrium. Recessionary gap is the difference between actual and the potential production, which is actual production being lower than the potential, which puts downward pressure on the price in the long run. This gap are evidenced during an economic recession and are associated with the higher unemployment. During recession, there is a reaction in the consumer expenditure or investment due to decrease in workers' salary. Here is the real GDP. In the real GDP, if you find trillions of dollar per year, this is four, and the real aggregate expenditures AE. If we see from zero, it's a AE. From 2 it will be AE1, real aggregate expenditures, and from 3 it will be AE2, real aggregate expenditures. So if you find out these things, this is the equilibrium point E1, and it's a $4 trillion, and this is the another E2, another equilibrium points. This equilibrium points is a $6 trillion. So in the $6 trillion, it has a recessionary gap, and this recessionary gap will be $1 trillion, and this six, this is the area where we can create full employments, and this will create some GDP gap. What is the Keynesian remedy for a recessionary gap? Increase a autonomous spending by the amount of recessionary gap. Keynesian macroeconomics argue that the solution to a recession is expansionary racial policy, such as tax cut to stimulate consumptions, investment, or direct increase in government spending that would shift the aggregate demand curve to the right. What is the government to do the close recessionary gap? Increase government spending, lower taxes, increase in transfer payments. The above policy shifts the aggregate demand curve to the right and closes the gap. What is an inflationary gap? Inflationary gap is that the amount by which aggregate expenditure exceed the amount required to achieve full employment equilibrium. The inflationary gap exists when the demand for goods and services exceed production due to factors such as higher level of overall employment, increased trade activities, or increased government expenditure. This can lead to the real GDP exceeding the potential GDP, resulting in an inflationary gap. What is the Keynesian remedy for an inflationary gap? Reduce spending by the amount of the inflationary gap. How can the government close all inflationary gap? Cut government spending, increase tax, reduce transfer payments. The above policy shift the aggregate demand curve to the left and close the gap. So this is the real GDP. If we find out the inflationary gap, and this is the aggregate expenditures. So everything will be converted in the trillion dollars. So from AE, aggregate expenditures, from zero, this is the AE. From 2 it will be AE2. From 3 aggregate demand, this is AE3s, and from $4 trillion, it will be there is the equilibrium point E2, and from 6 where that point there is equilibrium point E1. This is the GDP gap, and here actually full employment will be in the 4. So this is the way that how we can convert different kind of real things for our discussions, for we can understand a different kind of interesting topics, and by this way the macroeconomics concept, government and policymaker, they can take initiative how they can help, how they can focus, and how they can create some interesting things with their with their initiative. So if we can understand how we can create more employment opportunity, where is the point we can do the budget cut, or where is the point we can increase more taxes, and if we understand the gap between GDP's different factors, then government can take lot of initiative, and when government can take different kind of initiative, that times actually we can solve many problems, especially if we focus on the present world. Let's say a few days ago, ASEANs and China, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and all of the ASEAN countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Brunei, Singapore, all of the all of the uh, countries, they are doing a collaborations, and this is around one third of the economy. So what the deals, they are actually go for the macro initiatives, and they are creating a very good interesting economical hub, and they will handle the business. And when they handle the business in between these big countries, because they have more than billions of people, they can, the government employment opportunity can be increased. On the other hands, a real GDP and this kind of things also increase. Government can take lot of interesting initiative, and by this way, they can take necessary initiative. So in that particular situations, we can identify that this is the right times, that government can take lot of business initiative. And if government can take business relation initiative, and they make a proper collaborations, every country will be benefited for enhancing their GDPs, and creating lot more opportunities in their for their economy. So definitely we have to understand the real things. I would like to give special thanks Nurul Afsar Shishir, Mohammad Shohel Rana, Hosne Ara Firdaus, and I love to give thanks the other necessary important person, those who always supporting us, School of Talent Economy. The School of Talent Economy, we are trying to producing more interesting knowledge, and we are trying to create lot more valuable things, and by this way hopefully we can create a real life collaborations in between our community, and this is the way of developments, the business and other things. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions regarding this macro initiative, how the GDP works and how we can create more interesting things in between our community, then we can develop. And especially I want to say, now is the time that the micro initiative and the macro initiative, we can create a very valuable things. And when we can create a very valuable things, that time we can create more job opportunity, and we can create a different kind of interesting things. So if you have any questions, I can wait for today's sessions about this macro initiative, and even example those who are observing right now. And after these sessions, if you have any questions, you directly can text us, and we can take our necessary initiative for the future. Thank you for your valuable time and everything.